St. Louis City Board of Elections, and then to talk about some of the changes to our voting rights at the state level. We have Denise Lieberman with the Voting Protection Coalition, Missouri Voter Protection Coalition. And she has to leave. Do you mind if Denise goes first? A resident of the 28th Ward. Denise, please come forward. Thank you for coming.
Hey everybody, I'm so happy to be here, and thank you, Ben, for being so gracious. I am not going to take up a lot of your time, even though those of you who know me know that I could. I'm very grateful to be here because I am a resident of the 28th Ward, right over there in Waterman, just across the street from St. Roch's Church, and love it here. Grew up in University City, but have been here in the 28th Ward since 1998, so a little over 20 years. I'm the Director and General Counsel of the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition. We are nonpartisan. I want to say that here, since I know we're at a Democratic event. We're a nonpartisan state table of voter advocates who work to protect the right to vote. And we do that through a variety of means, through policy advocacy. In particular, we anchor the tracking of voting legislation in the Missouri General Assembly. We do a lot of analysis, talking points, help people understand what the bills are, help coordinate people to go testify in Jeff City on bills related to voting. We do that through strategic litigation. I help coordinate legal challenges and voting rights cases in Missouri with an eye towards sort of the bigger picture, making sure that the right people are at the table. We're pretty busy in that area right now. We just filed 2 lawsuits a couple of weeks ago challenging provisions of Missouri's new voting law, House Bill 1878. And we've got a hearing coming up next Friday on some of those measures. And most importantly, though, we do this through education, because the truth of the matter is, all the advocacy, all the activity in the courtrooms doesn't make a hell beans difference if people on the ground, people in communities, people in our neighborhoods don't know what the rules are and don't know how to exercise their right to vote. And that I really feel is the most important part about what our coalition does. We have about 60 affiliated partners with the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition, and they're really varied, for everything from student organizations at some local colleges to senior citizen organizations to civil rights organizations to disability rights organizations, LGBT organizations, environmental justice organizations, some neighborhood associations, and a whole lot more. And the goal is that when we can collaborate on shared education, messaging, and training and education, we can help make sure that all of our unique constituencies and neighborhoods and communities have the information that they need. Because the truth is, voting's complicated, right? And I say this even though our Director of Elections is wonderful. I'm a big fan. You've got your elections director here. He's wonderful. And it's not his fault that the law is complicated. The law is just simply complicated. And it's really hard sometimes for people to understand what the rules are, where they need to go, what they need to do. And often that insecurity is enough to keep people home. When they don't know what the rules are, especially if they think they're going to be scrutinized or checked or have their ability to vote questioned, especially if they've got a million other things on the table like we all do, but in particular, you know, people that are working 2 jobs to put food on the table, single moms, or seniors, or people with disabilities. They've got a million other things that are going on, and to add a lot of bureaucratic hassle, especially when it's confusing, is often enough to make people just say, you know what, clearly my voice is not wanted here. And that's what we're trying to avoid, because we believe that all voices are needed. And in a functioning democracy, the only way democracy works is that everybody gets to have a voice. Everybody gets to have a seat at the table. You may not agree with everybody. That's okay, right? That we can all live with. What we live with is saying, you guys get to have a say, but you guys don't. Right? Because now you're going to feel disillusioned, disenfranchised, disengaged, and probably say, you know what? I don't give 2 cents about this community anyway. And what studies show is that when people vote, it engages them even more. When people vote, they get more engaged, not just in voting, but in their own ward, in their own township, in their own neighborhood association. When they feel like they have a say, they feel like they have a vested interest in the future of their neighborhood, right? But if somebody tells you, I don't care what you have to say, you're like, well, forget you then, right? And so that's why we work to fight to ensure that all people have the right to vote. And we know that the rules, when there's a lot of new rules, they fall hardest on the people who already have too many things on their plates, right? They fall hardest on poor communities. They fall hardest on communities of color. They fall hardest on people with disabilities, on our seniors, on people that are working those long hours and low wage jobs. And so that's why we do what we do, to protect the right to vote. And the fourth thing that we do is help ensure that everybody knows that there's somebody to help them. And so on election day, and even beforehand, the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition coordinates nonpartisan election protection efforts throughout the state of Missouri. And this includes the 866-R-VOTE election protection hotline. And this is staffed by attorneys, a real attorney. I'm an attorney, you're an attorney, you could volunteer. Here in Missouri, I fought hard. This is a national program. It's actually the nation's largest nonpartisan voter protection program. But here in Missouri, I was like, no, anybody who calls 866-R-VOTE from Missouri, they need to talk to somebody from Missouri. Because if they're calling Washington, D.C., those folks don't know that St. Louis City is a different election jurisdiction than St. Louis County, right? They don't know. And by the way, Kansas City is the same way, y'all. Kansas City and Jackson County are 2 separate election jurisdictions. They don't know about the Delmar divide. They don't know where, all of the things that we all know about our hometowns. And so when you call 866-R-VOTE, you're talking to a lawyer here in Missouri, and that is coupled with poll monitors. You don't have to be a lawyer to do that. You don't even have to be a registered voter to do that. We do train you, and you get placed at polling places throughout the state. We have information, and really it's just about having a friendly face at the polls. If someone has a question, and because there's a new voting law in the books, many people are going to have questions this year. And so when we're there and we've got our vests on, or we've got these buttons on, or we've got these signs up, and someone is unsure, and they say, can I use this as ID? And our volunteers there walks through what the rules are and says, yes, you can. And you can take this card in with you, and you have the right to vote. And that instills a level of confidence in people that allows them to effectively assert their rights. And that's really what power is. It's not about doing something for other people. It's about helping empower. And we're going to need all the help we can get this year, because there is a new law on the books. House Bill 1878 was the bill. It passed in the final 24 hours of the Missouri legislative session this year. And it started out as a 7-page photo ID bill, which the lawmakers in Missouri have been trying to do for more than 15 years. I have now sued the state like 4 times over voter ID laws in Missouri, and now I guess this is the 5th. But it has probably 3 dozen more provisions on top of that. And many of these provisions were enacted very late in the session where there wasn't an opportunity for citizens to really weigh in. And so I'm going to tell you very, very quickly about 3. And I invite you to take this fact sheet that covers those top 3 as well as a few other bullet points about this new law. I'm happy to make this available to all of you. The Missouri Voter Protection Coalition, we meet every Monday on Zoom, and we often have 100 people or more throughout the state join every single Monday. And we have a listserv. We make all of these materials available, and we don't care about logos. Like, take this stuff, use it, take our logo off, put your logo on. Let's make sure that people have access to accurate information. I've been a voting rights lawyer for 25 years, and I focus my entire day, my entire life really, on this stuff to make sure that it's right, that it's accurate, so that people aren't confused. So 3 things. This legislation impacts people who want to do voter registration. There's 3 voter registration restrictions that we filed suit on. First, nobody can be paid or otherwise compensated for doing voter registration anymore. And so it used to be that if you work for a civic organization, I don't know, like say the League of Women Voters that has staff, you could be paid to do voter registration. You just had to register with the Secretary of State. But everybody else, have any of you ever stacked a table at a voter registration drive? Yeah, I have to. Well, now a lot of these new rules will apply to you. Not only can you not get paid to do voter registration, paid or otherwise compensated, and we don't really know what that means, but if you believe that you are going to register 10 or more people over the entire election cycle, you have to register with the Secretary of State as a voter registration solicitor. Now, this is available online at sos.mo.gov/elections, but you can't submit the form online because it requires an actual signature. So you can pull it up, but you will have to print it out, sign it, and then either scan it and email it back or fax it back. Who has a fax machine? Anybody? Anybody? Right? Or put it in the mail. And so one thing that we're recommending for groups that want to organize voter registration drives, number 1, don't pay anybody, because you cannot, nobody except for the government. So you can still do voter registration. Yes, you can. As can government agencies that are actually required by federal law, like motor vehicles and social service agencies. They can still do the voter registration and be paid for it. But folks like us, like non-government folks, can't. So we can't get paid. So make sure that people who are doing voter registration are volunteers. Make sure that they register with the Secretary of State. That registration, it's a short form. You do have to include identifying information, your name, your address, your phone number, your email address to the Secretary of State's office, and you have to have an actual signature. One thing that we recommend is if you're going to organize something, print out a bunch of those forms so that they're easily available to your volunteers so that they can sign them right then and there. You can fax them back for them. That's fine. They'll be covered for the rest of the cycle. And as all of you know, we are in prime voter registration time right now. The deadline is October 12th.
You have to have confirmation that it's been received.
Well, the statute is not that specific, but it does say that you need to register. And so we are recommending, and some of our partners like the League of Women Voters adopted a policy that said, yeah, you need to forward us your confirmation before we'll let you do voter registration. But I will tell you this, the Secretary of State's office has been pretty responsive. Most people are getting a response within 24 hours of sending that form in. You will get an email confirmation. So you cannot be paid. You need to register with the Secretary of State as a solicitor, and anyone who's doing voter registration as a solicitor has to be a Missouri registered voter and over the age of 18. So this is unfortunate for things like next week, September 19th through 23rd is actually National High School Voter Registration Week. By the way, today is National International Democracy Day. Yeah, I know, fun fact, fun fact. It's also National Disability Vote Week this week. Next Tuesday, the 20th of September is National Voter Registration Day. So there's lots of opportunities to uplift the importance of voting, even within these restrictions. Now, it is unfortunate that even with things like National High School Voter Registration Week, that many of our high school kids won't be able to do voter registration drives anymore, or are out-of-state college students. I work with lots of kids at WashU, I teach at WashU, if they're not registered to vote in Missouri, or returning citizens, right? So I work with some organizers who are on parole, they're not eligible to vote themselves, and they use that status very publicly to talk to people in their own neighborhoods, many of whom are also people whose families have been impacted by the criminal justice system or been incarcerated themselves, about why she cares so much about voting, even though she can't vote herself. So she's no longer able to do voter registration. So we filed a lawsuit arguing that that provision violates the free speech and expression rights of organizations that do voter registration, like the NAACP and the League of Women Voters, because it makes it difficult for them to advocate for voter registration. The second thing, the law makes it illegal for anyone to solicit a voter into obtaining an absentee ballot application. Now, I know that sounded really wordy, and it's not just the wine. I did have a glass of wine. This is my board too, not here for my board meeting. I'm reading it, I'm telling it to you the way that it says in the statute, because it is confusing. Because we don't know what it means to solicit a voter into obtaining an absentee ballot application. If you come up to me and say, I'm going to be out of town on November 8th, and I say, oh, you can apply to vote absentee if you're going to be outside of your jurisdiction. And here's the link to St. Louis City's, you have to apply to do so. Here's the link. Have I solicited you into obtaining an absentee ballot application? Sort of seems that way, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. And many of our partners do things like have the QR code. The application to vote absentee is available on the internet. It's on the St. Louis City Board of Elections. It's on the Missouri Secretary of State's website. And, our friends at the league have a QR code that goes right to the application. Is that soliciting an absentee ballot application? We just don't know. And unfortunately, it's a pretty severe offense. It's a Class 1 election offense. That's a felony, punishable by a fine or possible jail time and loss of voting rights for the rest of your life. That's right, Jackson.
I tell my kids who live out of state, don't forget to apply for your absentee ballot. I could go to jail.
Possible. Now,
And if you're canvassing, for sure.
well, so if you're canvassing, we have to tell people if you're canvassing now, and it just folks like ward organizations that go and canvass and check people's registrations and have that handy voter registration form in their pocket, which is a great thing, or that handy absentee ballot form in their pocket. I would say don't have that in your pocket anymore, at least not for a little while. We've also sued the state challenging this provision as well as a violation of free speech. The last week I did presentations at a whole bunch of senior centers and nursing homes and centers for people with disability whose staff regularly help their people get absentee ballot applications. The law says it's illegal for anyone to solicit an absentee ballot application.
So how is this being controlled?
Well, that's a good question. We don't know. The law just went into effect on August 28th. The election 2 days ago here in the city of St. Louis was the first time this law was in effect. And by the time it went into effect, it was already too late it was just about too late to get an absentee ballot application. So we don't know, but it would be enforceable by a local prosecutor. So in the state of Missouri, there are 115 prosecutors. In the city of St. Louis, that's Kim Gardner. In St. Louis County, that's Wesley Bell. Are they likely to prosecute people if you tell your kid to get? I mean, it's probably unlikely, right? At least here, maybe in the city, or at least in St. Louis County, but I don't know about Buchanan County, right, or St. Charles County. And the worst part is that if you're trying to actually do this as an organization and go canvassing, you're trying to stay within the bounds of the law, and you certainly don't want to implicate yourself or implicate these people are volunteering for you, and they're putting their own voting rights at risk. And then again, if you sort of add the layers of race and class, when we talk about the communities that most need access to absentee ballots or access to tools that they may not have, like internet, printer, scanner, fax machine, or all these things. These are also the communities that tend to be over-policed, over-prosecuted, over-persecuted, that, you know, can't risk having a felony on their records. So again, we filed a suit against both these things. We sought a preliminary injunction. The hearing on that is next Friday, September 23rd in Jefferson City. We will see. The third thing, and then I'm going to shut off, is photo ID. Like I said, there are about 36 provisions of this bill. Take a look at the flyers there. Please join the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition meetings. We have lots of guest speakers that come and talk on each of these things. The voter ID rules are rules that Missouri lawmakers have been trying for 17 years now. We fought them in court every single time and been successfully. But this year they passed. And what this law does is eliminate things like the voter registration card you get from Ben and Gary at the election board in the city of St. Louis, which is really helpful. I love that card. You know what I'm talking about, right? You get it right for election day. It's awesome. First of all, it has a barcode, so the poll workers can easily scan it. It has your name. It tells you when election day is. And by the way, since there's been a lot of changes to polling places, has anybody noticed that? And it's not just, I mean, and I know you're going to get some flack for that tonight, Ben, but the truth is this is happening all over the state of Missouri. Kansas City, y'all, also lost a ton of polling places. It's a combination of COVID. It's a combination of people who used to be poll workers before COVID, no longer able to be worked, all kinds of things, right? I live right across the street from St. Rock's Church. That was like the best polling place ever. Literally, I didn't even have to like get dressed. Now I have to like actually get in my car and like go 2 blocks to my polling place. And luckily it is not a burden for me. But the nice thing about these cards is it tells you where your polling place is. It tells you what time the polls are open. It tells you what ward and precinct you are in. Anybody have some questions about that now? Like, you know, we're here is 28th ward, but like next time we meet, we're going to be the 9th and 10th. We might not even all be together. So that's eliminated as a form of ID, as is a student ID, as is like a current utility bill or bank statement. Now what is required, and also, by the way, expired IDs, no longer, okay, ID from another state. So if you recently just moved here from Illinois, you have that Illinois driver's license, can't use that anymore. So what you need to show is a non-expired Missouri or federal ID to get a regular ballot. If you don't have one of those, you can cast a provisional ballot. But remember, that's a ballot that gets set aside. It's provisional by definition. It won't get counted unless either you return to your polling place before the close of polls on election day with a valid photo ID, or if the signature on the provisional ballot envelope matches the signature that the election board has on file for you with your voter registration. For many people that may match. For people like my mom's 91. She registered to vote in 1952. She's never missed an election. She's a former elected official herself, is totally why I do what I do. Because she's like, that's always fun. But she has a hand tremor. She can't replicate her signature. It looks nothing. She can't, just can't. Now, over the last few years, she's also become physically frail, and she's now on the permanent absentee list. And by the way, she's in St. Louis. She's in U City. She's in St. Louis County. But for many people, elderly folks, people with disabilities, that signature might not match. And for people who are just simply fearful of that scrutiny, it's enough to be a deterrent. Because in order to get, if your ID is expired for more than, I guess, 2 years now, or if you don't have a Missouri ID, and there's a lot of people in that boat, over 200,000 valid Missouri voters don't have a non-expired Missouri ID. You have to get one, and the only place you can get one is the DMV. Yay, because we love the DMV. And you know, not many DMVs are open on evenings or weekends. So again, I have the flexibility. I'm a lawyer. I can shoot out in the middle of the day when it's not crowded and I can go. But if I was working a double shift at the hospital, or if I was flipping burgers, right, I couldn't get there before they close at 4:30 in the afternoon, kind of thing, right? If I don't have access to transportation, I tried to take my mom to a DMV, and there was a little step to get in, and she's in a wheelchair now, and I tried to like carry her in, and you know, it was kind of a mess. And then you have to show proof of your identity, which is like a certified birth certificate, lawful status, proof of your social security number, which is like a social security card or tax records, and proof of your residency, like a current utility bill, to get that state ID. And if that original birth, if your name has changed since birth, like if you've been married, divorced, ordered legal name change, you're going to need those legal documents. If you were born or married or divorced out of state, you're going to have to go out of state to get those things. The state of Missouri will provide you with one free form of ID. It's not a driver's license. They're not going to give you the free driver's license. You got to pay for that. But if you have had one and lost one, so I'm working with a number of clients who are unhoused or were in shelters here in the city. And sadly, as many of you know, there's just far too many people who are housing insecure or have been couch surfing and don't have proof of their residency. And this guy was adopted and born in New York. New York is one of the 17 states that requires you to show a photo ID in order to get a copy of the birth certificate, which you need for the photo ID. Our friends at St. Francis Xavier College Church have been working with him for like a year, and they finally, I think we're going to get his birth certificate from New York, and that's going to be still 8 more weeks. So he can't vote this November. Like, that's before he gets his birth certificate. Then he first has to go to the DMV, and then it's going to be another X number or whatever till he gets the Missouri ID.
So you're challenging that.
We are challenging that. We have the state has filed a motion to dismiss. They don't believe that anyone will be disenfranchised since people can vote a provisional ballot. And that hearing is also next Friday in Jefferson City.
One question I had earlier, are all of these tied together? So it's all or one with this. So
No.
there are other provisions of the bill that are actually good.
Yes, there are two.
Is it all or nothing?
No, it's not all or nothing. And I'm going to end right after this because you're really here to hear your election director tonight, and that's who you're listening to. There are a couple provisions in this bill that are valuable for voters. One is that if you have moved from one election jurisdiction to another, which remember again, St. Louis City is a different election jurisdiction in St. Louis County. So if you move from your city down here, you've now moved to a new election jurisdiction. In the past, you would have had to register anew by the voter registration deadline, even if you just moved those couple of months. That deadline again, by the way, is October 12th for anybody that has a friend that they need to update the voter registration. This new law will allow you, if you are already registered in Missouri, to update that address at the polls. That's a good thing. Also, if you end up going to the DMV, again, right, because you gotta get your license renewed, that will also transmit your voter registration electronically, which they didn't used to do. That's a good thing. And the third good thing, in my opinion, is that it allows for 2 weeks of no excuse absentee voting. Missouri is really an outlier. The vast majority of states in this country allow anybody to vote absentee without providing a reason. The government in most places doesn't care why you're voting absentee, but in Missouri, you can only vote absentee if you meet one of 6 reasons. And we've long been saying Missouri should allow anybody to vote absentee. Well, now you can, with a big sort of asterisk. It's only for 2 weeks before election day, even though the rest of absentee voting is 6 weeks before election day. And it's only in person. So you have to be able to get to the election board during the hours that they're open. And most of the time, they're not open evenings or weekends. They are required throughout the state to be open the Saturday for election day. Some places try to stay open a little bit longer. But for people that can't get there, they're not going to be able to vote, no excuse absentee. And then again, if you think about who those people are, they're the people that don't have access to transportation. They're the people who are sick. They're the seniors. There are elderly. There are people who have childcare, elder care responsibilities. Those are the folks that need to get those ballots at home. And the sort of flip side of this law is that it's illegal now to help those people get that absentee ballot application. It's a felony. And so those are the folks that stand to be harmed by this. Just to more directly answer your question, the photo ID and the no excuse absentee voting are tied together. And so if the court does throw out the photo ID requirement, we will lose those 2 weeks of no excuse absentee voting. That's unfortunate, but the truth of the matter is that lawmakers have been introducing no excuse absent. First of all, we shouldn't have 2 tiers of voting. There shouldn't be, 2 different classes of voters. If we want no excuse absentee voting, it should be available to everybody. Bills have been introduced every single year to allow Missouri to join the majority of states, allow anybody to cast a no excuse absentee ballot.
I gotta, I had to renew my license because my, license that expired on my birthday insurance, and I had never received a card in the mail. And so when I went to go vote, when they tried to see, I guess scan, it was invalid, so I was not able to vote.
2 days ago, you mean?
Yeah,
Wow.
I was not able to vote.
Did you vote provisional? Did you vote provisional?
They told me I couldn't vote. They just said that it's the paper, I had a paper, temporary license, and they turned me away.
I'm really sorry to hear that. That brings me to how I'm going to close, because you really do need to hear from your election director. This is what I want everybody to know. Because of these new changes, people are going to be confused, and it's not just going to be voters, it's going to be poll workers too. Even poll workers that go through training, these are, they're getting paid a little bit, but this is not their job. They're basically volunteers, they're civic volunteers. I have been doing voting rights and election law for 25 years, and this stuff is complicated to me. I do this at the national level, this stuff is complicated to me. Okay, so we know that both voters and poll workers are going to be confused. Please, we have attorneys, we have people at the polls. If you do anything, just help us spread the word that they can call us. I know this ends up resulting in more calls from me to Ben on election day, but the truth is it works. It works. When Ben would rather hear from me that we have a voter that's having a problem and the poll worker is confused and not doing the right thing so he can fix it.
I'll say right now, I take care of you right away.
He does.
Will not stop.
But we don't, that's because we don't call him based on rumor or innuendo. That's why we have attorneys and we have people at the polls. We don't call him until we have investigated a situation, made sure that the voter has attempted to do everything that they could, and that there's something wrong that he can control. I would be very interested in talking to you. I am just trying to close out my time, but here's what I might ask of you. I would very much. I'll do you afterwards.
They said that it wouldn't pay attention down.
Yeah, so yes,
I got a picture of it.
I would very much like to talk with you about that. But here's what I want to do, because I want you to hear from your election director, because he runs the elections in the city. I want to ask you, take some of these. These are nonpartisan. There's nothing partisan about these. You can take them to your church. You can take them to your barber shop. You can take them to your local sandwich shop. You can take them to your local neighborhood association meeting. The more people know that there's someone there that they can call, because here's the problem. If I had heard from you on Tuesday, we would have a lawyer, we would have been able to get to the bottom of it before you left the polling place.
Yeah, but those signs weren't out there.
I know they weren't.
I didn't trip off of it. because
I know. Well, we had people that were getting there, but we will have a full operation in November.
Where can we get this?
Yes. The information's on here. The information's on here. I'm gonna leave this entire box here, and I want you to take them with you so people know they can call us. This hotline is open. It's gonna be live all day on election day, 5:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. And it's open now. And I want to stop because you need to hear from Beth.
Thank you, Lisa. It's really helpful, inspiring, terrifying. I mean, I feel like if somebody asks, if for example, one of my student children asked about it, can I give them information if they ask?
Yeah, they don't tell.
Yeah.
All I can tell you is no one can solicit a voter into a meeting and ask them.
Unbelievable.
But we don't know what that means, and that is why.
I feel like I would follow that source. So, yeah. Anyway,
We think our attorney general is going to volunteer to step in for our prosecuting attorneys to make sure that it's being done.
I do not believe that it can, because it's a state law, and it is the province of local prosecution.
all right. So moving on, Ben Bergman is our Democratic Director at the City Board of Elections. And we'll be able to share with us why we keep changing our polling places, what's the cause, how it helps, doesn't help, and also what we might expect in November. So thank you so much. I know you've done an election a week for the past 6 months, so it's been a huge burden, but really a benefit to all of us. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. Whoa, hey. So thanks for having me. I think Ian's saying that this is usually more attended than it is tonight. I guess everywhere I go, lately it's low turnout. So anyway, that was my attempt at it. So I guess the issue is why, the question is why there's been so much change lately in the election. And I guess in a nutshell, this has been an insane year. In some part, it all started here in Ward 28 with the vacancy that was created, I think it was in January. It's been kind of going on ever since then. As Ian said, there has been just an insane amount of elections. Since April, I think we've had 6 elections in the city. Yesterday was the first day the absentee voting machines were completely off and no one could vote on it since January of this year. So it's just been a really busy year. And then also too, with prior to this year, we had the intention, the Board of Aldermen was kind enough with the mayor signing it to give us money to buy new voting equipment. And so we started this year with the expectation we were going to buy new voting equipment, kind of change the layout of how voting happens in St. Louis. We got embroiled in just a bunch of elections, redistricting on top of it. That's not an excuse. It's just to kind of give the reality of what has been going on. So I guess let me try to answer the question of why there's been so much change with our polling places. So this has been a redistricting year. The state lines changed late May, about the same time House Bill 1878 went into effect. Excuse me.
I'm so sorry.
No problem. So, and then also to the ward map, which was went into effect, I believe it was at the end of December. So those two things happened, and we redrew the ward lines here in St. Louis and also added the state rep line on top of it. What that did was cause precincts to change, and so kind of the map that's sitting over there. One of the prime examples is I think we're now in Ward 10. Ward 10-2 now has 2 polling places in Hamilton School and DePere School. My understanding is that Hamilton School used to be part of Ward 28. Is that correct? That's not correct. But basically, whatever the alignment was there, I believe the state rep line was moved, and it caused those two. Well, it caused those 2 polling places to be in the same precinct. So, you know, there's kind of an issue there that needs to be sorted out. Now, so I guess the question that's been kind of most on my mind, or what's the most questions we got recently, is the special primary election that happened 2 days ago and what we did there. So pretty drastic change. I think, as Jack said in the paper, that it was a recipe for confusion. And so the issue is that we decided to use for this election what's called vote center models. And vote center models are used in different jurisdictions throughout the state. And the idea of a vote center is that anyone can vote at a polling place, regardless of where their assigned polling place is. And so that means that as far as, you know, I could live in South St. Louis, but I happen to be over in the Loop that day, or I happen to be in the Central West End, and Schlafly Library is right there. I could go vote in the Schlafly Library. I do not have to go to my regular polling place that I'm typically assigned to. And so we used that election as a means to introduce this model of voting to St. Louis. And so the reason why we could do that is, again, the Board of Aldermen who gave us money to try to institute this idea of vote anywhere. With that, we bought what's called ballot on demand devices, and those ballot, did anyone vote on Tuesday here? Yeah. Okay. So that means if you did and you did not use a touchscreen ballot, that means your ballot was printed for you by a printer that was at the polling place. There's large benefits to that. One is that it does allow that ability to produce the ballot for the unique ballot for the voter. It also eliminates waste, and that's one of the hardest things about election day is to prepare for election day. You have to be prepared for everyone, and so that requires basically overspending, overbuying, being over prepared for what you don't know is going to show up that day. So that's something we did. And so we put this into effect. And as far as those polling places, there were 3 polling places in the city that were fairly stressed during the day. Those being Booter Library, Schlafly Library, and also Missouri School for the Blind. And those devices worked well. I mean, there were some lines towards the end of the day as people voted, but for the most part, they were able to keep up with the demand. And so they proved that they work. So the idea is for November is to not reintroduce, but to put back in place the precinct-based system. So every voter is going to be assigned to a polling place. Then on top of that, we're going to have vote centers as well. And so November in St. Louis, voting will be more accessible than it's ever been. You'll have more options to vote. It'll be easier to vote. And it's going to be, the key part on our end is to communicate that to people. So I appreciate Ward 28 inviting me here tonight. I expect the basic press release notifying voters of this, what's in place, will be released soon, hopefully within the next week. So that between now and November, we can kind of just hammer in the idea of where you're supposed to go so people know what to do. And also another change to, as Denise said, is the no excuse absentee, which actually is a huge blessing to voters. I mean, honestly, to have 2 weeks of no excuse absentee prior to election to plan your vote. As many of you are aware, I think you stated it. Did you vote early absentee when we were talking?
I voted early absentee. Yeah. It was easy. And so I think everybody ought to be able to do it all the time.
Yeah, and so we had 4 satellites that were available for that election that happened 2 days ago, and then we're most likely going to have the same 4 satellites open again. And we were talking about just the burden that election day causes and the stress it causes. If people can utilize absentee voting, if people can plan their vote and vote in those 2 weeks, it will be a benefit to all voters. So those are things that are going on. I'm counseling at this point. I don't know if anyone has specific questions. Go ahead.
So you said, so I put it I do know that the turnout was about 6%, and so the fact that it worked for me, if usually in a November election, polling place is backed up to line, it's like this is school, goes around the block. So I hope, I guess my request is, I hope there's like 3 printers, not just one guy printing one sheet at a time.
Sure.
But also, second thing is, how many polling places will there be? So, when I used to try to recruit people to volunteer at polling places, we had 6 in the 28th ward. Then it went to 5. And then the lines changed for the precincts, and then there were 2 in what was the 28th ward. And then in last week or this week, it was 1. So, yeah, you can vote anywhere, but there are very few places to vote. And so in November, you're going to expand again. How many polling places will there be?
So there will be most likely out. So in August of this year, we had 73 polling places without the option to vote anywhere. Speaking to the 20th ward particularly, so I know there was a lot of consternation about New City School being removed as a polling place. So New City, I didn't say that. New City School will be back again as a polling place this election. Also, Schlafly again will be vote anywhere. So that means anyone that's in the.
So not every polling place will be vote anywhere.
Yes. So right. Then the reason behind that is because we don't have the not the printers. The printers isn't an issue. The printer is the ballot scanners that it's inserted to, so they do not have the memory to hold a citywide election on there. So, but there'll be, so that's part of the thing about the communication part of it is, so it's the precinct, so everyone will be assigned a polling place. There also will be using, if someone will go to our website, the polling place lookup tool we have now, it has GIS capabilities to kind of identify closer polling places to you, and it will give you your options. So if that makes sense.
So I put all that.
Yeah.
Communications, that's all. Yes.
Okay. Just hi.
Hello.
Hello, Queen.
Everyone from 84, thank you all for inviting me. My question is based off of communication, not the last election that we had. I got a lot of complaints, traditionally from the seniors who live in those senior buildings, who could go behind their building and go. A lot of them did receive the cards that come in the mail to tell them where the new location was. So what literally happened was I was stopping at the senior buildings. I had a sprinter. I was picking them up and taking them way over to West Side Church from where they normally voted at Homewood, which is right behind the building. I ran into that a lot. And then I also, literally, I vote across the street from my home because I was little bitty, yay high, I was already over there. But I even had an election judge that was running around and said that he didn't know what his polling place was. So he knew that a lot of people hadn't received the information. That was the frustration from our community.
I totally understand. Like I said, it's communication. I mean, so the idea that we had, it's not obviously not to suppress vote. I mean, that's not the idea. The idea is to make it accessible as possible. And with accessibility, it's options, but part of the whole problem is the communication. And I mean, I'm following the sword for that for our community. Literally, it's not the way it was done. I mean, basically, it was like 2.5, I think, weeks before the election was when the plan was unveiled, and that's honestly not right. I mean, it's not cool. It's not good to anyone, but it's not helpful. That's why it's kind of this week. Listening to these talk about the registration, you think I've been focused on trying to get the plan together and get it out as soon as possible. Because you still expressed confusion about that idea of overlapping vote centers, and but the problem is we have to communicate that. And you say my polling place, I've been voting forever. That's how people view their polling places. It's personal to them. It's something that it's like an ownership type of thing. But from my end, it's like voting is a service, right, to people. And the idea is providing the best service we can. That might entail breaking some of those models, right? So the same model, there might be a better way to do it, and there might be a better way to think about it. And I can tell you honestly, I mean, the map that's in front of you right now, it's something I've had my head in a map right since March of this year. And lately, what I've been focused on is basically looking at voters and where they live. And the idea is catering to the demographics that St. Louis is. St. Louis is, I don't know. But it's catering to the population, right? And so realizing, we're not St. Louis County, right? We're not Kansas City, we're not just, we are St. Louis, right? And so people here in St. Louis is made up of different populations. Like in that one map we were looking at before, you know, there's a belt that runs down to the middle of St. Louis, but no one lives there. No one lives there, right? And so, but you look at it and it's like, you look at city and you think of it as a geographically, but it's a city made up of people, right? And so that's the idea, is trying to make a better way for people to vote, and that's it. And so it's like, it's been slow steps. So, you know, in my mind, phase one was this election we had 2 days ago, introducing the idea of vote anywhere to people. Then by next spring, hoping to have that, the vote anywhere at all polling places kind of hammered home. And that's my goal. And I would really appreciate it. So I would just say that's that goal. That's what I want to see happen, and that's what I'm working. And so, first step, next step is precinct based, also vote anywhere. Make sure voters understand what their options are, and hopefully people turn out. You know, it's like that's the plan.
Yeah, question with the low turnout. Did you get any feedback from the people working at the polls of how the process works and how it affects their job?
Sure. I mean, I ended up working, so I showed up at Missouri School for the Blind like 4:30, and I come from Booter School. Booter School was super crazy when I was there, but people were voting as a really good place. You know, keep in mind it wasn't one race ballot, so people were voting in 5 seconds. They were getting their ballot going. But then I went over to Missouri School for the Blind, and Missouri School for the Blind, I had been there earlier in the day, say around 11 o'clock, and it was busy, but it was nowhere near when I showed up what it looked like. I mean, it was a line. You know, if anyone's familiar with Missouri School for the Blind, it's a big place. It's got a big auditorium. There's a nice like a line that goes out of the building into the hallway, and there were people lined up all the way down the hall. And so it's like, you know, I got staff there as soon as possible, but I ended up working the line, processing voters and doing it. So I will say it was very busy. I mean, it was constant voting.
Yeah, but given that we only get one issue on the ballot, what is it gonna be like in November when we have more?
Sure. More races. So one way I hope we're going to address that is the card that we sent out for this last election. The last election was card. If anyone got it, I understand your senior citizens did not get it, but it was different. I mean, it was a brochure. Yeah, big brochure. So we tried to include in there changes on election law. We included information about the polling places, and then we also included a sample ballot. While the sample ballot was small, the election notice card we're going to get for November is that it's going to, every voter will get a unique election notice card that will have their own ballot on it. And so the idea behind that is to give voters the information about what to expect when they go in the polling place. And that's hopefully to help move the line in some sense, because the voters know what's on the ballot, they know what races to look at, they know what their expectation. You know, there's less examination about less time the voter will spend in the polling place. So then, right. And so, you know, I guess the idea too, it's a general election. So the idea is to staff it and to make sure, you know, like preparing for 100%. You know, that's what you have to prepare for when this election happens. That means more bodies in polling place to process voters. That means more, you know, the idea of just being ready. And also people have to be patient. People, you know, have the right to vote, obviously. They need to take time, we need to appreciate other people's time and their voting as well. And there might be a little bit of a line, but we'll get the process. Is that okay? Not okay? What do you want to see happen?
What?
Yeah, what do you want to see happen?
What I do have a problem is that we don't have, I feel like we don't have time and to change.
Sure.
And as a result, we're gonna have people that are stressed out, they don't get to vote. And that's not democracy. You know, it really isn't. And that's what I'm really concerned about, the process not being communicated in time for them to make a decision to even go.
That's valid. I mean, but so we just got off another, you know, a citywide election. It's the second citywide election we've been on. I appreciate the concern, but all we can do, that's the point, is get ready. And, you know, and so that's how you shine the precinct-based model, right? So assigning people to one precinct, but then also having another option. So say, you know, that say something's more convenient for that voter, say something works better for that voter, to just kind of spread out voters. Spread them out, right, rather than concentrate them in places. So if voters want to utilize that option of something that's more convenient, that option will be available. Then also too, the idea of the no excuse absentee, that's 2 weeks where a voter can plan to vote. So it'd be, to me, that's the point that needs to get hammered home, right? We need to have, we need that process, that option for voters to plan their vote with the idea, you know, it's more convenient for everyone to do that if a voter votes in. Back in 2020, we had 4 satellite absentee applications. I was 3 months on the job when that happened, right? 3 months on the job. I put in place the four satellite locations, and we handled 43,000 absentee voters, right? In an environment when there wasn't excuse-based voting. That's what I want to see happen again. I want to see voters come out and utilize that. So that's what I would appreciate being communicated.
So many changes, and I think it really makes it hard for committee people that our job is to get people out to vote. And at this point, we're educating ourselves on the guidelines, you know, it's a lot that we're dealing with as committee members, that we're dealing with at this point. And we have to be a quick study to get this done so that we can communicate it to our voters.
I'll tell you something else. Something else I'd be willing to do for you. If there's data projects, if there's things that you want, if there's ways that we can help you identify people, populations, target groups that you could be communicating to, I would be more than willing to help you do whatever you need to communicate with people, because that is key. I mean, it's like it's partnership. It's from our end, helping voters know. So if there's anything if there's some idea you have for what we can do, I'd be willing to help. Okay?
Can you still sell frequent voter lists?
We can. There's the state law. I can't remember what restrictions it placed on it. I think there's certain things that when we do the public service request that are removed from there, but the key data, the data is there, and also too, so as far as voting history and things like that are included as well.
Yeah. So I have, hey, if I asked for the night board, would it only be since the night board existed, the new night board, or would it include voters who were previous 28 board members?
So when you MCDR, which you pull the voting history from, is like a living thing. So that means it will reflect the voting history of the person as they are now. Yeah, and so we would say yes. That means if I voted in April and I was in Ward 13, but today I lived in Ward 1, say Ben Borgmeyer, Ward 1, voted in X.
I like the new, I mean, I don't like the new photo ID law, but I like the, where you get to vote anywhere. Because this one lady was like, I had never been in Julie Davis Library, but I just happened to be over here, so she was able to go, she was able to go in and check out Julie Davis Library, and we just got all that new, construction, it just got remodeled. And so it's giving people, a sense of going into other communities that they probably never even laid feet, you know?
Well, libraries are great partners to have. I mean, they do an amazing job. They're very supportive.
Yeah.
All of them. But I'm really concerned about what you said before. I was texting. I didn't hear anything about that. I mean,
I
That
didn't
actually
feel
happened.
about it because I knew to get the vote in November, but I, called the DMV and they said that my life.
well, I'm not concerned about I can't control the DMV. We train poll workers not to say, tell us.
Turn people away.
Yeah, they're not trained to do that. So. It's like, you can't. Well, right, well, I mean, I can tell you with full hours. So if someone comes in this process, so if the voter is a voter, registered voter, point blank, the voter can vote. So if the person has an ID, the person can take the ballot, they go sit down and mark the ballot for the tabulator. If the person does not have a ballot ID, and by the way, one thing Denise did not say, so it's a state ID, valid state ID that has an expiration date, right? So the thing has to have an expiration. So if you're a state employee and the ID doesn't have an expiration, that's not a valid ID. So that's one thing, just, she did say that just to add. But if a voter shows up, does not have a valid ID, then the voter is asked their name, they say where they're at on the poll book, they find them, they locate the voter is then given to the provisional table, and the voter would then vote the ballot, but then they would also fill out the blue provisional envelope. That would have information about the voter, and then you would, like Denise said, you would sign it, and that would come back to the office, and we would compare the signature to what we have on file. We had 41 provisional ballots from Tuesday.
So
So if you went-
my license is expired,
Right.
or I've lost it. I've got a warrant because I didn't go to court. I can't renew my license because there's a holdup.
You would show up, we're not gonna arrest you. You show up and you can say, what, I'm Joe Schmo, they look up in the poll book, Schmo, is that the correct address, Mr. Schmo? Yes, it is. Have seen the provisional table, you need to fill out the provisional ballot.
But then do I have to come back the same day with a valid unexpired ID?
If you would come back and a valid, if you would come back with a valid unexpired ID, then you would be given your ballot and then you could vote it and tag it.
What happens to the provisional ballot if I don't?
Then it goes back to election board, we take that blue envelope, we compare what's on file in our, the signature, and then if it's on file, we count it, and also too, you could call us and check that. You can call and say, I'm Joe Schmo, what happened to my ballot, did you count it or not? And so you, as a voter, you could follow up with that. You can say your name and they can check that, or there is I believe there is some type of document that you the voter there as well. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Monica Butler. I'm with the Gospels Hall of Fame.
Yes, ma'am.
But my question for you is, right before I left out, you said something about you all got money,
Yes.
something like that. Did you all, do anything to raise the rate for the poll workers? Their pay?
So yes, I cannot remember how much increase we've had. When I started back in 2020, poll workers made 120, just a general poll worker. I believe it's over doubled that since then. So there's been, that was one of the first things we did after. No. So that happens during the process of certification. So by law, we have 2 weeks to certify an election. So that means certification for the election happen on Tuesday has to happen by the 27th. So over that 2-week period, that's when we do that. We make sure that we have all the provisional ballots and then we compare them. It usually happens fairly quickly within that 2-week period. But so we'll probably certify the election that happened last Tuesday by next Tuesday. And so by then, all the provisional ballots have to be compared, counted, or given a reason why they're excluded. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So,
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess theoretically, yes, but it would take a large number of provisional ballots. So like, there's 41 provisional ballots that we received. So, that 41, it depends on what the margin of the election is. Yeah. Right. How we report what we reported Tuesday was the unofficial, the final unofficial results. And it doesn't become official until it's. Yes, ma'am.
Vote everywhere.
Yes.
You can't really vote.
Well, you can't vote in St. Louis County.
Well, but in the city, because it said not every home.
Oh, right. It's a vote center where anyone at that vote center could vote.
Okay, so, but then, logically, that doesn't make sense. It's not. It's going to continue that way.
I guess the correct way to say it is at vote centers, any voter can vote regardless of their assigned precinct.
Right, they used to put a limit that vote anywhere, because that makes it confusing. It was true this week. Okay, and that was the other thing, is there, we have to continue or.
I guess, so I understand the confusion part of it, but the thing is about confusion, the reason for it is to make voting more accessible. The problem is how it's being communicated, right? And so I think that's the issue. It needs to be communicated clearly. And if it's communicated clearly, it is a benefit to voters. Well, where do you vote? Where do you vote? Well, okay. So there's one.
Something everywhere
No.
is not a good, anyone in certain places rather than anywhere.
Any votes, you can vote, any voter can vote at any votes. That's good. So, yeah, on your election notice card, it'll tell you your assigned one place, and it'll say, this is the vote center, there you go, right? And it'll say, have a list of vote centers on it. The one we put out had a map, there likely will be some form of map. And it's like a community project. Like, I appreciate community people coming in, helping out with the project. People like you who are part of organizations, if you could tell people, I'd be happy to try to talk more clearly to your organization to explain their options to them. Anyone, anywhere, anyone, anybody. Ask Michael, like, shoot his ear off outside Sheffield Library, probably, and that confusion because it's election day and I'm going out of my mind. But, I am more than happy to talk about it. With voters on election day, I spend the majority of my time chasing down people that are walking away from polling places to talk to them about, I just confused. So I'll try to stop them and talk to them. It's like I said, I appreciate the confusion, and it's largely caused by me. So if I would love to try to clear that up. All right.
Thank you very, very much. It's very much appreciated. Speaking of elections, we just had an election on Tuesday for president of the Board of Aldermen, which is a primary. And because of our new elections laws in the cities, the same candidates who are on the primary ballot will be on the general election ballot in November. And one of our candidates for president of the Board of Aldermen is here. And I'd like to give Jack Coder an opportunity to speak. Current alderman of the 7th Ward and new father.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you very much. But I gotta jump in on this election stuff. In my spare time, I'm a practicing lawyer, and this will be the first election in a decade. So every election since 2012, I've run the voter protection program for the Missouri Democratic Party for our Democratic ticket. So basically doing what Denise does, but the partisan version on behalf of Democrats, where we can put folks in the polling places. It's sad to give up the reins to that program. It's something I love dearly, but I'm on the ballot, so I can't really be doing that. Confusion. There's confusion all around in this voting thing. Maybe Ben's guys caused a little bit of it, but the reality is this is what the Missouri legislature wants. They want confusion in the city of St. Louis about voting, and they're getting it. So now we've got this new photo ID law, we've got vote centers, which are ultimately a good thing, and we've got provisional balloting, which you mentioned. All right, 41 in my little election that didn't count the other day, but there's going to be a lot of provisional ballots in November, and they can swing an election. If you've got thousands and thousands of provisional ballots in our base vote jurisdictions of St. Louis, Kansas City, Boone County, where the University of Missouri is, parts of the Boot Heel, where we still have a lot of Democrats. If you've got thousands of provisional ballots, that can swing an election. And so what Republicans are going to be doing, and this is their playbook, and this is what they do in other states. Sorry, this isn't my campaign stump speech. I'll give that in a second. I'll abbreviate it, promise. What they're going to do, if we're close, if we've got Trudy Bush Valentine close to the finish line, and it looks like we're going to maybe even squeak by and get a Democratic U.S. Senator, what they'll do is they'll go challenge those provisional votes. In the weeks following that election, the Republicans will be knocking on Ben's door. They're going to want to see all those signatures. They're going to be running to court, and they're going to be trying to get those votes thrown out. And that's not right. And that's the ultimate goal here, is to make sure Republicans are trying to make sure we can't elect Democratic candidates statewide. That's why these new laws are in place, and they're wrong. And I hope Denise is successful. I know she's got a big hearing next week, and there's really a lot on the line with this. We got an uphill battle as Democrats in Missouri already, and photo ID laws like this make it even more difficult. So enough of that. Sorry, that's a passion of mine. But I'm Jack Coder, as Ann said, and I'm running for president of the Board of Aldermen. For those of you that came out and voted Tuesday, thank you very much. As I told everybody, see you again in November. And this really is a strange situation we're in, having two elections, and it's a result of some of our own local confusing election laws. But we're on to the real race, the November general election. I'm running, because frankly, I think we need an independent voice at the Board of Aldermen, someone that's a strong voice, that's going to set a clear legislative agenda. And also I'm running because I'm getting frustrated with some of the direction the city's headed, especially relating to our city services. I look out my alley, trash is piled up. There's no rhyme or reason to when it's going to get picked up. You try calling 911, people are getting put on hold. I toured the 911 center just the other day and was shocked, frankly, to see a room, 20+ chairs on one side, desks on one side, computer monitors, 3 people answering 911 calls for the whole city on a Friday afternoon. 3 people, a board sitting there. You can watch the calls stacking up, people getting put on hold. If you call that non-emergency number, you're going to be on hold forever. But if you're having a real emergency, you need to be able to get through to somebody. And if you do get through, you need to know that EMS is going to be able to show up and help you. If you've got medical emergency, that the police are going to show up. If you've got some sort of public safety related emergency. And the reality is right now, we're short-staffed all around. We're short-staffed at that 911 center. We're short-staffed with EMS. We're short-staffed with our police department. We're short-staffed in our refuse department, our tree trimmers, our parks. And we're not providing the basic city services that we're all paying for. And for so long, we said, well, we can't, we don't have the money, we're broke, it's St. Louis. That's been our excuse. That's not the case right now. We've actually got a once in a lifetime opportunity to address some of these structural issues with our city services in particular. We've got the money. We've got $500 million of funds from the federal government. We got hundreds of millions of dollars in money from the Rams settlement that still got to get divided up between the city and the county, but it will. And that will be available. So we can address some of these pressing issues. But we've got to have leadership that's making this a priority every single day. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you as president of the Board of Aldermen, I can fix all these problems, but I can tell you that I'll be a strong voice advocating for them, for equitable delivery of city services everywhere in the city, in every corner, because I think that's important. It's something that all of us as citizens expect. And if we want to grow this city, if we want more residents and more businesses to come to the city of St. Louis, we got to be able to do some of these basic things right. So I'm asking for your vote on November 8th. And to the extent the 28th ward is going to do it, is this just a 28th ward now, or are we having multiple wards? Okay. All right, we got the 18th ward here. We got the new 9th and 10th. I'm asking for the 28th ward's endorsement. Whenever if you guys do make endorsements, I would love an opportunity again to speak if there's a separate meeting for that. And Ann, thanks for having me again. Thanks, everybody. Sure, I'll take questions. Well, that's up to you.
Well, I find for time,
Okay.
we've got a speaker for the other candidate.
Oh, I can come back next month.
Of time, but it is an opportunity, so folks have to leave, I guess is what I'm saying, thank you for coming, we started late. If you need to leave, don't feel badly about that, if you've got a couple questions.
Well, I was asking what you say, Ms. Ennis.
But I'm not clear what you have to say. Anyway, specific questions for
Yes.
Jack?
Yeah, cause I have a specific question, to Alderman Coley. North St. Louis, you campaigning for the city of St. Louis, correct?
The whole city, yes, sir.
Okay, are you going to campaign in North St. Louis?
Most certainly.
Okay.
Yeah. Have been and will continue to do so. I've got a lot of work to do in this campaign. I mean, this first round, the reality was we all know we were both moving on. So there's sort of you can spend some resources, but you got to sort of gear up for the big fight in November. But yes, Eugene, I'll be campaigning in every corner of the city. Yes, sir.
Yes, you mentioned the windfall that we're going to be getting, and that's great for the short term, but what is your long-term plan to fund the potential pay increase?
Right.
That would be going to.
It's a great question, because you're right. You can't just use, sort of one-time appropriations to adjust, to fix salaries and create long-term obligations. So, I mean, one of the powers of the president of the Board of Aldermen is its role in the budgeting process. It's a big part of the job. You serve on the Board of Estimate and Apportionment with the mayor and the comptroller. You have access to the budget director. So that's where we've really got to make some changes. And that's where we got to do a deep dive. And this really hasn't happened in the city in a number of years, You've got to look at all these departments, go one by one and say, okay, in the streets department, we've got, you know, I don't have the exact number in front of me, 40 something vacancies. Well, are we ever going to fill those 40 positions? Maybe not, but let's get 20 solid people for that department that we really need because it's short staffed, and take the other money, because we're allocating money right now for 40 people that were basically all 40 positions that are all underpaid. Take 20, use the other dollars to increase the salaries long term. So I mean, there's a lot of savings in these various departments you can go find, increase pay for the folks that are already there doing the job so we can keep them and hire some more. Now, we're going to get our workforce back to the size it was 5-10 years ago? No, but at least we can hopefully retain the people we've got and hire some new ones. I mean, it's a challenge because the city, I mean, you're seeing workforce shortages across the board, right? And we can't really nimbly adjust as much as the private sector. If you're running a business and you can't hire anybody, you can pretty quickly raise your wages and bring people on. We can't do that as a city. You know, we need a pay bill. It takes a year to get that done and get that instituted. But we can use some of those short-term dollars for those ARPA dollars or those RAM settlement money, which is completely unencumbered, because you could use those as hiring incentives, which is say, okay, well, look, we'll give some bonus for any new hires that agree to come work for the city, you know, in the next 6 months. We can use the money for that, but you're right, you can't just create a long-term obligation with those funds. It's a good point.
Not a question, just a comment. Your question, I believe, and I've spoken with both candidates, and so they are both coming to North City. We are planning a meeting right now.
I know, I think I sent you some other dates. We'll get that sorted out. Yeah. That's what we're talking about, getting a couple more scheduled. I know I think we're also doing one that's going to be streamed live, I think October 25th, like right before the election. But I know we're trying to get a couple more planned. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I don't think we've never met before.
I don't think so.
I got like 4 questions, but they quick questions. One, well, I guess this wouldn't be, you just said your answer. I know some city workers that would like to start at a minimum of $20 an hour.
Yeah.
Do you theory support that?
Okay, I do very much so. I mean, we've got, I mean, $20 an hour is basically the, you know, kind of the going rate for a lot of jobs right now. We should be at least that for city employees, and for like temp employees in particular that are more of our hourly workforce in the city, where we're really struggling to get people hired.
Okay. The second question is, some residents on next door, I was looking at some residents on next door, abandoned cars removed in Florida.
Yeah,
Have you worked on that?
I have, yes. So, you know, getting abandoned cars removed nowadays is quite a challenge. Back to our workforce shortage. On most days, we have one tow truck driver for the whole city.
Right.
And so if there's an abandoned car on a busy thoroughfare, which of course we see all the time, those calls, literally one, those take priority over the abandoned cars on our streets in Soulard and elsewhere in the city. Yeah, it's a huge frustration. And now you used to be able to call your alderman, boom, that car is gone in a couple of days. They throw the sticker on there, they're gone. Now they're sitting, and they're just sitting and sitting. The sticker will go on, the sticker comes off, the car stays. I mean, that's one of those areas where, I mean, if we can't keep up, that's something I see private tow trucks all the time. I mean, that's something that I think we could easily in the short term, in an effort to sort of get through that backlog of abandoned vehicles, contract with some of these private tow companies. The city's been reluctant to do that because about, I don't know, that was almost 20 years ago, that caused a big scandal with the police department. We're a long way from that. I would hope we could, you know, have enough checks in place that we can get these cars towed, but it's a serious problem.
My last question.
Yes.
What is your long-term goal? Is if you lose this election in November, are you gonna be running like the longer term for board office president next year?
Well, I'm trying to win this election and run a city government. So my philosophy is always going to take it one election at a time. So right now I'm here to ask you for your support on November 8th. On November 9th, I'll maybe talk to my family and figure out what's next. Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you got a portion of the 7th ward. I don't know if it's part of town. You don't have any? Okay, so you got, you're close by.
Relationship with some residents.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got the but we do events in North City, like Mr. Eugene said.
Yeah.
We do events all across North City, St. Louis, so it would be good to see,
Yeah, and you will. You'll see me out in the coming weeks. Now, this is my first time running citywide. I've run for alderman in the 7th Ward a couple of times. And this is my first time putting myself on the ballot as a citywide candidate. So I'm campaigning in all corners. Thanks, Representative. Thank you, Ann.
We also have Alicia Sonier, who's a member of the school board and is here on behalf of the other candidate, who was the successful candidate 2 days ago, Megan Green. Alderwoman Megan Green.
Okay, so first, I know she said I'm a member of the school board, but we all know that being in office is one thing and campaigns are another. So I am on the board of education, but right now I have my campaign election hat on, just so we can make that distinction clear. We don't want to have any more needed elections in the city of St. Louis, so I'll keep it like that. That's okay. So when I was coming tonight, this is actually like my first time speaking at a meeting without Megan. And so usually Megan, you know, candidates give their stump speeches. I might talk before her and introduce her. So I was trying to figure out, should I give Megan some speech? Because if you ever worked on a campaign, you know your candidate's stump speech probably better than they do. Or do I want to talk to you about this election from my perspective? And honestly, I don't know what the campaign political correct thing to do, but it feels a lot more authentic to speak to you about how important this race is to me and what it means to me and what our city is becoming. We're at a major influx point for the city of St. Louis, a major influx point. My introduction to politics and to political engagement was the murder of Michael Brown. I was 18, he was supposed to be in my class, and I saw a Black mom on TV cry about, do you know how hard I worked to get my son through high school? And I was watching that and thinking, how hard I worked to get my son through high school. And I remember calling my mom and being like, Mom, you always have just been telling me like college, college, college. And I just saw this woman on TV saying how hard she worked to get her son through high school. And then, you know, you get mad, you get angry, I protested, that was my response. You organize, you talk to people in your community, you just yourself, I was 18, so I was just eligible to vote. And so that was the best way that I knew to engage. But what kept happening while I'm engaging is I keep finding myself in front of politicians. I'm in front of the board of aldermen, I'm talking to state representatives, I'm talking to senators. As much as I'm like, I don't know about government and I don't know about their role, I kept finding myself when it was time for things like advocating for a minimum wage in our city, it's politicians that have to sign on that. It's city politicians that have to sign on that. When I'm analyzing our budget and I'm trying to figure out where is our money going, why is none of it making it to my community? And I'm seeing where the bulk of it goes, there's politicians who sit and make up that. So a large part of the importance of this election that we have coming up on November 8th is that the president board of aldermen, they're going to sit on that estimate appropriation board, and that's going to have a huge impact on your overall budget for the city of St. Louis. We have seen what it's like when we invest resources, how we have. It's what got us here. I know some people want to make it seem like the last 18 months alone since we've had Tashard Jones are the reason why our city is where it is, but that's a very narrow and short-sighted view. Disinvestment, intentional disinvestment in communities all across St. Louis, but let's be honest, especially on the north side, has been intentional, and that's been a choice by your political leaders. City services is certainly a concern, and we're running behind on that, but also staying alive is a concern. Just this week, we lost 2 scholars in our district, and that's not uncommon, unfortunately, for us to use students. So while city services are important, there are residents that are very concerned with that. There are some residents that, you know, if you're born on the north side of St. Louis, you have a 15-year less life expectancy than a white person born in Clayton, Missouri. And all of these conversations about, well, let's fix the trash and let's focus on that and that's starting there. That's very important, but we also need to talk about some of the systematic things that are happening that are producing certain outcomes. Because you can find anything that's like bad in general in St. Louis. And when you get to folks of lower income, when you get to people of color, it's worse for those folks. So the reason why I support Megan, the reason why when she was like, hey, what about being my political director? I didn't even know what a political director was. But the reason that I accept it is because she has a vision that's truly for everybody in the city of St. Louis. She has a vision that's not colorblind. She has a vision that's not, I don't see color, or I just want to acknowledge this Band-Aid issue. She has a vision that's not about criminalizing the homeless, right? Not about banning encampments, not about finding people who are trying to feed homeless people. She has a vision about what does it look like to actually invest in our city and invest in the people in our city, everywhere in our city. And those are the types of things that are on the line. Of course, I'm happy to take some questions and speak more about it. The election this past, we've had our conversations. I don't think it's ideal for anyone. It's already a special election, and then you have 2 weeks notice to tell the whole city, hey, these are all of your new polling places. That's not ideal, and that's not easy for anyone. Turnout was actually higher than we expected it to be. But we have a lot of work to do. And then I think the only other thing that I would really lift up, Megan does have the endorsement of Tashara Jones. I think our city, part of the reason we haven't been able to make progress is because we've been in a gridlock. We've had this big part of the legislative body fighting the executive body for a long time. And I think we really need to elect leaders. First of all, 2 women who share overlapping visions and goals. It doesn't mean that they're each other's puppets or that they're not independent thinkers. It means that they understand that they're here to serve people and they have the ability to work together and collaborate because they share values and morals. And I think that's really important. I want us to be able to start getting to conversations about solutions to problems rather than just, honestly, I've watched Board of Alderman meetings and people arguing for 12 hours. We deserve better than that. We need to get to a point where there's somebody that can build a bridge and build a coalition and that can examine our whole city and come up with the solutions that are needed. Thank you.
I remember, because you brought up the homeless, I remember, when we had that shelter on gravel. Megan really came through. She really came through, but it ended up being shut down. I remember, since you brought it up, I do remember.
Yeah,
She helped start the process in 2015. Yeah. When we were working with City Hall and, passed the Stephen Shepherd over and, Tree, that church St. Peter's in. Yeah. And she was there every time.
Yeah.
So I do remember.
I mean, this past Saturday, I sat with Megan for 3 hours in a tenant ward meeting, listening to them. Nothing to take pictures, not even allowed to take your phone in, nothing for press, just to talk about some of the early ideas, and she's not even elected yet, on what it might look like to have a tenant bill of rights in our city and making sure that we're listening to residents that are being most impacted and taking time out of her campaign to do that. I mean, people can tell you, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that, and I care about our people getting paid, but honestly, if you pay your city workers and the majority of your residents are not making money, you keep having problems like what you're having now. A lot of the problem is like these group of people versus these groups of people. Either all of St. Louis wins or all of St. Louis loses. There's no option for that. And there's really only one candidate on the ballot that has a record. It's not new, it's a record. I met Megan in protest. I didn't even know she was elected for my first year knowing her. That's how often I've seen her in the community and in the streets. And when I learned she was elected, I started knowing her for like 3 months. That is how, like, just because she was involved, and the first time she started talking about like, alter this, and can you come to my meeting? Can you come hear what they're talking about? I wasn't even trying to pay attention to that. I was like 18 and mad, but that is the way that I have known her to be. And to take it the following level to policy. She led the minimum wage policy on the board. She led the decriminalization of marijuana on the board. That is the type of leader that she's been and she will continue to be. I also think it's really important that there's only one candidate that has also committed full time to being on the President Board of Aldermen, that has said that they're not, given a clear answer. I won't be working in any other capacity. I will 100% be your President Board of Aldermen. And I would say we've got to be really careful because that sounds like a really political answer to me. When I win the election, I'll let you know what I'll do. Usually we know what that means.
Can you tell us about the,
Okay, I can switch hats.
okay.
Okay.
And I'm not in a rush, I could be here all night, I don't really have much to talk about, but we just have, see you, Jack. No, I wanna know what's the thing with the superintendent,
Yeah, so we are getting a new superintendent for St. Louis Public Schools. Dr. Adams has been with us for 14 years and he's retiring. Honestly, I'm 26 and he's been a superintendent for 14 years of the 3rd largest employing entity in the city of St. Louis. A typical superintendent in our district like ours, their lifespan is 3 to 5 years. So he's done well and above his service. I would encourage us to give him all of his flowers, to take on that type of fight every single day. And I can tell you, he sends emails at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. He makes phone calls 6 a.m., 7 a.m. So it's a very job, and it's a very important job. So we're undergoing the process now for superintendent. He's leaving in December. So from January until May, we're gonna have an interim superintendent. The interim superintendent is gonna come from within SOPS. Absolutely. Right now, there's a survey online. It's a very brief survey that's available, but we're gonna end up probably having at least 3 community meetings, and then, like Kim, you might get a separate invite, because we're also gonna have focus groups of people who come from certain backgrounds, but we won't hit everybody, so there'll definitely be opportunities for community engagement. And I can send it to you too, if you can't, it's on all our social medias, but if you don't see it, I can also send it to you. Yeah.
So it's like, this is, to me, it's like the most important thing.
Or promote in general? Yeah, I mean, I think, like, so stabilization of neighborhoods, when I think especially being on the board of education, you can see how that hits you. I mean, like, everybody knows transportation and buses was a big issue. A huge part of that is because the stabilization of neighborhoods. When neighborhoods are broken up, when they're not intact, when there's a school here, then there's a school there, but there's 4 schools here, but my kid's going 20 miles away, it makes it harder. How are you gonna get, even if you can find, like, you probably need double the amount of buses that you had, and not necessarily because your district is more spread out, but because your kids and people are going to different places. Also, we have kids that move 9 times in a school year. A school year is 9 months, and 20% of our kids are unhoused. So when you're talking about neighborhood stabilization, or the stabilization of people, and making sure that you're building a city for everybody, I'm really thinking of my students who have to move 9 times and really the families, because they don't, like, no, who wants to do that? I'm also thinking of families that, I wish that I could come to school ready to learn, but I got a slum tenant, and my apartment that I'm paying rent in is not up to code, and I don't even know where to go to that or what to do with that. So I definitely think that neighborhood stabilization, which honestly, like, the city has to be honest, that that's the result of intentional disinvestment. Like, there are some areas that just haven't got money. And also, as a city, we have to decide that we want to be one city and acknowledge that we are one city. Sometimes people of color, sometimes honestly, especially in schools, white people don't want their kids to go to school with people of color. And what I see even more sometimes in race is that people with a certain economic class, they don't want their kids to go to school with a kid of another economic class. And it's tearing our city apart.
So you would say neighborhood stabilization is top of the.
For sure, especially via equitable development, right? And you have to have a city that's working together in order to have equitable development, so that a developer can't go here and talk to this author and cut this kind of deal with them and invest in their community this way, but then go to here and talk to this author and go that way. So neighborhood stabilization, which honestly, again, the PBOA position is going to be very important, because they're going to be the leader of their board. And so any type of ideas that you have about a citywide approach to development, even being in partnership with the school district and working with us, because we're one city, that type of leadership is gonna be under the president board of aldermen. And also the St. Louis Public Schools get 60% of our revenue from property tax. So when whatever money we are not making, that's directly impacting us.
She don't believe in, she wants to get rid of automatic courtesy.
Yes, and she wants to get rid of automatic courtesy and have a citywide approach to development and a citywide agreement, so that you're not going to each one and coming to individual. Before you even come to the city, it's already laid out for you, hey, this is what we're looking for.
It is very late. Thank you all for staying. Julianne, do you have any other remarks you'd like to make?
Faithful at some of our meetings,
And I don't even have a transmission. I don't even have a car. I've been without a car for 2 months now. So I've been on the bus, walking.
Our friends at the car.
Yeah. But I like getting on the bus because when I see the people on the bus, they're like, oh, you gotta go on the bus boy. I don't really have much to say. We were supposed to have veto session this week and we didn't. We gabbled in and gabbled out. And so veto session starts on Wednesday. They want to propose a big $700 million to like $1.1 billion in tax cuts for the wealthy. And that money will pull away from like services, like money for our public schools, people with developmental disabilities, veterans, healthcare. And so we've been getting a lot of emails from people that have been encouraging us to vote no on the tax cut. Special session can go as far as up to 60 days. We haven't even had veto session yet. So Wednesday is veto session, then right after veto session is supposed to be special session, we might stay all the way till Friday, however long it's gonna be. But I'll keep you all posted. So we haven't really made any movements yet on anything until next week. So at the next 28 ward meeting, I should be able to give you all some updates, or if you're signed up to my weekly newsletters, read. So that is my update from the state level. From the local level, I'm hosting a problem properties town hall, and it is in the Ville and the Greater Ville. You came last time, you did too, Mr. Beard, but you all are more than welcome to come to the problem properties town hall. We will be tackling how to address problem properties in North City, St. Louis, so that it could be a better place for people to come vote, so they don't have to look at the vacant buildings, right? So that is on September the 24th. And you are more than welcome to come, committee woman. I'm trying to see who's gonna take me home today. He didn't? Okay, I thought I had a ride, but I don't know. Okay, I was gonna ask you, I knew you'd take me home.
Sure.
But that's it, read my newsletters, because they go out every week, and thank you all for coming tonight. You want me to pray out? Oh, did you give an update?
I'll just do.
Absolutely. Well, I don't have much of an update. I do, hopefully everybody here, I think everybody here is on the mailing list. Definitely inspired by our state reps mailing list. I think it's pretty helpful. So I've been adopting that same plan, and I get a lot of good feedback of it, so subscribe to that. But the two things is the Kings Highway project, they have extended the comment period until October 9th. So you can go on that same website, and if you haven't made any kind of suggestions yet, you could do that. Also, this hasn't been my newsletter yet, but it will be in my next one, because I just found out about it, but the Lindell Union project, they are now taking comments feedback and everything about that project. So I'll make a link to that on my newsletter. That's pretty much it. Session starts tomorrow. So I'll start having a lot more legislative updates, not just like state service updates, but that's gonna be exciting to get back in session. So that's it. I know they're about to kick us out. So does anybody have any questions? All right. Yep. All right. Well, that's it. Thank you, folks.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Thank you all for coming, appreciate it. Please sign in before you leave, if you haven't signed in already.
Congratulations,